Now we ready to go? Got everybody on? Got everybody? Okay. I'm calling to order, and are you going to do a roll call in or just take the folks? Okay. All right. Next thing is the invocation.
To make intelligent decisions, and thank you for all of the wonderful things you have given us in this world. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Now we've got public input.
Hi, Regis. This is Adrian. We had one registered speaker. At this moment, I do not see that registered speaker joining us today.
Okay. We will continue to watch for that. Perhaps they thought it was going to be at the end. All right. We're going to skip opening remarks now. I'm going to hold those until we get into the open discussion. So, Chad, if you're ready, kick it off.
Okay, testing. Can everybody hear me? And can you see my screen? There we go. Looks like you can. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is talk through an update to the timeline. It's still not super specific. It doesn't have dates on it, but I wanted to sort of reorient just a little bit because things change and we're doing a lot of work, and it's good to understand what the process looks like. So we are standing today on the star. That's the little icon that represents today. We are still, importantly, we are still in what we're calling our pre-rate increase sort of consideration period. And that sounds funny, but what that means is we are sharpening our pencils, we're doing math, we have ramped up our outreach into the community. I spoke at a luncheon about this stuff just today. We're in listening mode and we're in math mode. And so today at our rate advisory committee meeting, I'm going to walk through some bill stuff that y'all have been asking for. And I'll talk about some rate design items as well. Next Monday, we have a board meeting, our monthly board meeting. And that's represented by this item right here. So it'll be a status update to our board. We still have not officially announced that we are seeking a rate request with our owner. We haven't done that sort of formal pass off of paperwork yet. We do think that's coming soon. Can't tell you exactly when, because that's still moving around a little bit, but very soon we will be sort of officially starting this process, we believe. What you'll see on the slide, so with City Council down here at the bottom, that's the orange bar, sort of outlines the 4 presentations that we will make with City Council. The first one is revenue requirements, and y'all, of course, know what that is. That's our buildup of our costs. A couple of weeks after that, we will present our rate designs, which will include the actual bill impacts for all of our different types of customers and customer groups. And then the third presentation will happen a week or so after that one. And that one is actually the CFO of the city that y'all met a couple of months ago, Ben Gorzel. He will provide a recommendation based on his team's very thorough evaluation of all of the schedules and pro formas and numbers and data and strategy stuff that we provide to them. And so he'll actually be in front of council speaking and sort of giving his thoughts and takeaways. And then shortly after that, we will actually, just sort of bumping up to this blue bar at the top, we will actually come back to our board after having provided some status updates over a couple of months. We'll go back to our board and say, okay, here's everything that we heard from the community, and here's the results of all of our thorough analysis. And here's officially what we're recommending, and we will ask them to approve that recommendation. And that's the green bubble with the check mark at the top. And then a few days to a week later, we'll go back to city council and we'll ask for their approval. And that will end the process of a rate request, assuming it ends in the way that, we need it to end. That will be the end of that process. But, I was pretty careful to represent, there's more bubbles over here, right? And that just means our work as a group is not done. We've talked about this. We're seeking your input on the rate request now, but we have a lot more to talk about in the coming months. Okay. So that's the timeline section of the agenda. Moving on to the next agenda item, I'm going to give you a presentation on the bills. You guys have asked a couple of times for some sample bills and an explanation of how the bill works. So I'm going to start with that. And then I've got some competitive data I'm going to show you, benchmarking data of our rates. And then I'll talk about the rate designs that we're considering. So those are the objectives. I just kind of hit those. The agenda flows the same way. You start with the bills. We've got both residential and commercial benchmarking. Then we'll end with the rate design. Okay, so we've talked a couple of times about our different rate groups. Sometimes we refer to them as classes, but these are just customer groups. We often talk about them around the halls here just using the abbreviation, and that can be confusing. It doesn't really, matter what the abbreviation means, because sometimes they're not, named the most intuitive name, but I still wanted to share them with you. So RE is our primary residential electric rate. It stands for residential electric. We've got about, 600,000 customers on that rate. That's a very simple rate. It's got a monthly flat charge. We call that a service availability charge. They all have one of those. And then there's no demand charge. Of course, they all have energy charges as well. PL is one that you've heard me reference a lot. That's essentially the small commercial rate. That's like a UPS store, or even a grocery store can be on a PL rate. It originally, the abbreviation was power and light. It was just the commercial rate was power and light rate. Over time, it has become really the small commercial rate. Above that, at higher levels of usage and demand, we've got LLP, which is named large light and power, ELP, extra large power, and super large power, SLP. So we're math people. We're not the most creative at how we name stuff. Okay. So here is just a screenshot of the bill. And it is not my intention that you're able to read this. I'm just representing what I'm about to talk about. And also, Ann, you sent these out?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, so Ann sent a PDF that had, 15, 20 pages in it. And it was sample bills with, redacted account numbers and account names and whatnot. So you can really kind of dive in and analyze how those different bills work if you'd like to. So this is a basic residential bill. On the front, at the top part, is a chart that we provide. It's just kind of monthly usage, for the last 13 months or so. And then below that, it's a comparison of the current month versus the previous month versus the current month last year. And so you can kind of see, am I using more or less month over month and year over year? And then this portion up here, of course, is the charges. It's sort of the summary of the charges, what you paid last month, what you need to pay this month, and the balance on your account. The bottom is a remittance slip. Then you flip over to the back, and this is where, I was going to say this is where the magic happens, but it's not really magic. There's different fees and charges that are built up on the back. That's the part that we're going to look at in more detail today, okay? Because that's kind of what matters from a rate making point of view. Okay, so this is that electric section. So this, you see right there, it says electric. That's where the electric charges are. So I've blown that up. And I think these are actually different numbers, but it doesn't really matter. That's this portion of the bill. Okay, so what is in the bill? Well, this rate has, this is RE, so there's a basic residential electric account. It has a service availability charge of $8.75. And that's every month, no matter how much energy you use, you get that $8.75 charge. Okay, the next is the energy charge. And the energy charge is, it's where some of our problems lie with our rate design. And so on the tariff sheet itself, when we do a rate case, when we do a rate increase with City Council, they're approving an ordinance, but they're also approving a pack of tariffs, pieces of paper that have all the rate stuff on there. The tariff, the piece of paper for RE, it shows the energy charge is 6.91 cents or $0.0691, okay, per kilowatt hour. Now, every month when you look at your bill, it will say whatever the kilowatt hours are times 6.91 cents, okay? That doesn't move around, it doesn't change. It's in the tariff and it's approved by council. I cannot change it without their approval. Oh, I forgot to tell you what's in these, I'm sorry. In the service availability charge, in the monthly fixed flat base charge, you're paying for a service drop, it's the actual meter, it's the cost of billing you, our software system to get the bill out the door. It's the cost of our customer service elements that are on your bill. The energy charge has a little bit of fuel, which is sort of the variable cost of generating a kilowatt hour. It has some other variable pieces, some operating and maintenance type variable costs, but it also has quite a lot, in this case, of fixed cost recovery. So the cost of generation capacity, the cost of our distribution lines and transformers, those are fixed cost investments that we make. And on this bill, we're recovering it based on how many kilowatt hours the customer uses. Okay, so that's the energy charge. The next line is the fuel adjustment. Now, this price, on this case, it's 2.568 cents. You won't find that number on our tariff. Okay, our tariff has a section, it's actually a long section, that says fuel adjustment. And it basically lists the rules of this fee. Okay, the fuel adjustment is what's called a cost tracker. It's like a fuel surcharge. If you take a plane trip or you ship a package and you get charged a fuel surcharge because gas prices are high, that's a cost tracker. That's what the fuel adjustment is intended to be. The energy charge itself actually includes about $0.015 of fuel cost. The rest of fuel cost is in the adjustment, and that just gets added on top of the energy charge, okay? Now, it's a separate line item because it's a cost tracker, and we change it every single month. And that's because we buy coal, we buy natural gas, we refuel our nuclear plants, we purchase renewable energy, and we purchase energy on the market sometimes, the cost of which goes up and down. And so while this number is not listed on the tariff, the language that gives us the authority to change that number is listed on the tariff. And every single month, one of my teams, the team that is responsible for this number, they go over to City Hall, well, now it's virtual, and they have a meeting with somebody in Ben Gorzel's office, and they walk through the numbers, and they show them the expected fuel cost for that coming month. And this is a monthly process. It has to happen. And they sign off and they say, yeah, okay, looks good to me. So we have the ability to change it because of what's in the tariff, but we have oversight every single time. The regulatory adjustment is a similar mechanism. It recovers the cost of transmission, most of the cost of transmission, and regulatory fees like ERCOT fees. We do not change that every month. We really only change it once a year, typically. That fee is, like I said, it's recovering the cost of transmission. And in Texas, the cost of transmission is socialized across the state. And that's because transmission assets can serve more than one community. And so all of the transmission service providers, us included, we file mini rate cases with the Public Utility Commission whenever we want, right? And we don't do it every year, but we could if we wanted, and some transmission service providers do. But we file a little rate case with the PUC for our transmission cost recovery. And the PUC, the staff of the PUC, reviews our application, and they either approve it or they deny it. I mean, they always approve ours because ours are well put together. But sometimes they have questions, and we got to go back and answer them. When they rule, they give us approval to recover a certain amount of costs, and that gets added to a big fee that is charged to every customer in ERCOT. And then based on our load ratio share of the ERCOT grid, we get a portion of that. But our customers also have to pay into that pool just like every customer in Texas. So that's what is represented on that line item. And then this specific bill, the customer is enrolled in our affordability discount program. So it has a line item called affordability discount. And you can see on the right side with the numbers, it's $8.55. That's a flat discount of $8.55 every single month, no matter what the usage is. And that's for electric. There's a $3 and change monthly discount for gas. So if you're a combined customer, you get electric and gas, you get, $12 and change every month. Okay, that's electric. I'm not going to go through one from every single customer group because it gets redundant, but I did want to show you a commercial customer that has a demand charge because the cost recovery works just a little bit differently. Service availability charges it's intended to do the same thing, but the cost of having that customer and serving that customer is higher because they're bigger customers, bigger meters, et cetera. What's different really about this bill is the demand charge. So that's the fee that's based on the demand, the KW, not the KWH. And this customer is a relatively large customer, 1.5 megawatts of demand or 1,589 kilowatts of demand. And so every month, whatever their demand is that's measured by their meter, and there's some logic in there that actually compares it to prior months and takes the greater of. But for simplicity's sake, every month the meter tells us what their demand is, and we multiply that times 875. This is a non-summer bill. That goes up to $11 and change in the middle of summer. Then this one's interesting because it's got two energy charges. Let me try to explain what's going on there. The first energy charge is 3.8 cents. And the customer pays 3.8 cents for the first X number of kilowatt hours. And X is defined as 250 times the demand. So in this case, 250 times 1589 equals 397,250 kilowatt hours. Okay, so for the first almost 400,000 kilowatt hours, they pay 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Every other kilowatt hour, in this case, 589,000 additional kilowatt hours, they pay 3.39 cents. Now, why is that? That's because this rate is still recovering some fixed costs in the variable charge. It's actually the fixed cost of generation. And so we've calculated and we know, okay, well, if you're this amount of demand, you should be paying this amount of, generation fixed costs. And then we've done the math and we've said, okay, well, it's 250 units per kW of demand if I charge them an extra half a penny per kilowatt hour, right? So if you compare 3.8 cents to 3.39 cents, it's about 4 cents, right? Call it half a penny. Well, half a penny times 397,000 is about $2,000. So what this is essentially saying is once the customer pays $2,000, they don't have to pay any more for generation fixed costs based on their size. And then the next, 600,000 kilowatt hours, they pay a half penny less energy charge. Fuel adjustment and regulatory adjustment work the same way. In fact, every customer pays the same fuel adjustment every month. Regulatory adjustment differs by class or by group of customers. Okay, so that's what's on the bill, on a commercial bill, and that's kind of the costs that are recovered from the different line items. Okay, a little more detail on fuel adjustment. What is in fuel adjustment? Okay, I frequently say it is the variable cost of generating a kilowatt hour. Now, I just told you there's a little bit of that fuel cost, about a penny and a half in the basic rate, that 6.9 cents that I showed you. But the adjustment takes care of the rest of it, okay? So what does that mean? Well, the cost to generate the power, the coal, the natural gas, or the nuclear fuel, it's also our renewable contracts. Now, renewable energy is energy. We sign a contract to take the energy, and they're what we call take or pay contracts. I mean, we're obligated to take and pay for all of the power that's generated by, whatever facility we're contracting with. And we typically sign it at a fixed price. So $40 a megawatt hour. That is a variable cost to us for energy. So it gets built into fuel adjustment. We also have market power purchases. Every once in a while, we've got a unit out for refueling or something, and or maintenance, and we go buy power on the wholesale market. And so that cost goes into the fuel adjustment. Also, the step fees are built into the fuel adjustment. So the cost of our energy efficiency and demand side management programs are built into the fuel adjustment. Okay, so that was the first section of my presentation this afternoon. The second piece is benchmarking. Okay, so I'm going to go through, we actually spend a whole lot of time every single month looking at prices all over the country. We benchmark against the major cities and communities in Texas, and then we also benchmark against the top 20 most populous communities in the country every single month for both electricity and gas. This view is a common view. It's sort of the best view that we produce every month. It's the combined residential bill comparison. So the blue is the gas portion of the bill, the orange is the electric portion of the bill, and then the total is out to the right. Now, this one is the one that was produced based on September 2020. Okay, so it's a little more than a year ago. And I did that intentionally because my next slide is September 2021. Actually, I think it may be August 2021. And it changes. And so I wanted you to be able to see that. This month, back in September 2020, we were the lowest in the state. And we actually have been for several years now. Now, this view it's what I call the shopping value. If you live in a deregulated market, the description of the plans that you can enroll on is on a piece of paper that the PUC stipulates how it is formatted, and it shows 3 price points for the rate that the customer could select. One is at 500 kilowatt hours, one is at 1,000 kilowatt hours, and one is at 2,000 kilowatt hours. And so we yardstick against 1,000 kilowatt hours and 5 MCF. 1,000 kilowatt hours is pretty close to our average residential consumption, which changes each year. It's about 1,060, 1,080. So at that usage level, our bills are the lowest in Texas. You got us, then Austin, and we're frequently very close to them. And then El Paso it's a regulated market. And actually their utility spans into New Mexico as well. They're quite a bit higher than Austin. And then you got the deregulated markets, okay? Dallas, Houston, Corpus Christi. So this was September 2020. But if I fast forward to August 2021, we had a change. And this change actually had been building. So since that September view, each month, we were getting a little closer to Austin. And so you can see, as of August, we're right on top of Austin, just a little bit higher. The reason for that is because we had a very advantageous natural gas situation happen in 2019 and 2020. We actually ended up being able to take natural gas at a very low cost because of some maintenance that was being done on pipelines, and the oil wells had to keep producing, and they're selling natural gas at very cheap prices. And we were one of the only utilities that could buy it. Okay, so we were on top of Austin. You see how over time it just moves around. So El Paso now is almost the most expensive. Houston has dropped below Corpus. So there's movement, right? As is the movement on, the makeup of the composition of the bill. The gas portion kind of moves up and down, so is the electric. Okay, so again, this is at that shopping value of 1,005 MCF. And I'm going to show you that 500 and 2,000 in a minute. But before I did that, I wanted to show you the trend. So this is what you saw 2 slides ago. So September 2020, 142.55. September 2020, 142.25. Okay, so the light blue line is San Antonio, dark blue line is Austin, and you got the other markets up here. And you can see that since February 2021, everybody's trending in generally the same direction. Houston's a little bit different, but even they lately are trending up. That's because the cost of natural gas has gone up. So we're the lowest or second lowest and have been for many, many years on the residential side. Here's at multiple usage levels. So this is 502 MCF, 1,050 CCF, or 5 MCF. So this is the August 2021. So this 154.10 matches 154.10, okay? Because it's the same usage level. It's that 1,000. And then you got 2,006 MCF. And here's what's interesting. We're number 2 at 500. Austin is lowest. We're number 2 at 1,000. Austin is lowest. But at 2,000, we're number 1. And Austin is quite a bit higher, 10% almost higher than we are. That's what rate design does. Okay, they have what's called an inclining block rate. We've talked about that. The more you use, the more you pay. Per unit, not just in total bill. So that's how Austin's bill works. Now, what about the commercial side? This is PL, and PL is kind of a strange group because there's kind of 2 pockets of customers in PL. And so we're showing the median and the average. And so the median is about 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. And the average is about 5,500 kilowatt hours per month. That's because you got some that are way high that are in this rate initially, and then they grow. And where the orange bar everybody else is the gray bars. Now, this is just electricity, okay? The overwhelming majority of our commercial customers are only electric customers, so that's why I'm showing only electricity. So you can see Dallas, Houston, Corpus, man, they're really low. We're not too bad relative to the regulated utilities. Same with when you look at the average. Here's the other commercial classes, LLP, ELP, and SLP. Still have these deregulated markets at now just under 6 cents, almost 5 cents, around 5 cents. The regulated markets are all up here. Now we're on top. We are a little more expensive for the commercial bills. But what I think is most interesting is your regulated markets have really high commercial prices, and your deregulated markets have very low commercial prices. But if I look back at residential, like this one, my regulated markets have very low residential prices, and my deregulated markets have very high residential prices. Okay, why is that? Well, when the market opens, the customers that spend the most money are the ones that shop around the most. So your commercial customers shop around the most, and they know the most about it. And so to get them as a customer, you got to go really low on your price. Residential customers don't shop around. They don't know as much about electricity. And so you can get away with charging them higher prices. But in every regulated market, typically the commercial customers are subsidizing the residential customers to some degree. And we've talked about that at length. I just wanted to have you see that in the actual price points charged. Okay, so that's my last benchmarking slide. The last portion of this presentation, how am I doing on time, Ann? I think
You're fine. You're
okay.
fine.
All right, thanks, Reed. So the last portion of the presentation is about rate design, okay? Now you've seen a version of these charts before. What's different is the bar in the middle, okay? So residential on the left-hand side, our current revenue stream is 7% from the fixed charges on the bill. That's the $875 service availability charge. The cost to serve, of course, is 60% fixed. With this rate request, and this is still, in a state of flux, it's still kind of early. We've designed something that puts most of the rate increase into the fixed component of the bill. And so it makes this mixture a little different. After the rate design that we're contemplating, residential customers would generate 11% of their revenue from the fixed cost on the bill, the fixed charge on the bill. Now that doesn't look like much movement. Here's why. Fixing the problem entirely is a really big deal. It takes a lot of months, a lot of years of discussion and consensus building on how to solve the problem. And so what we're wanting to do is take a baby step in the right direction. It doesn't solve the problem, but it makes it just a little bit better. I kind of view it as sort of a no regrets kind of move. I mean, there's, this is kind of a simple thing that we absolutely should do. We're doing the same thing with commercial and industrial. You could see those percentages moving up just a little bit. Here I've broken down the commercial. And so LLP, ELP, SLP, every single one of them, you see the fixed components of their bill getting higher, okay? Now PL is kind of a strange animal because they don't have demand charges, and their service availability charge, at least right now, is the same as the residential service availability charge. It's $875. So they're kind of in a bad situation in terms of their rates. And unfortunately, I can't do much about it without really impacting some groups of customers much more than others. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that until I'm able to, fix the rate for good. So that's why that's not changing too much. Okay, so I think I said at the very beginning, I'm going to show you the impact of rate design and why rate design matters. We looked at Austin's price, right? Their rate design generates a much higher bill at higher usage, but lower at lower usage. What you're looking at on this slide is, well, the bars are the monthly bill amount, and they are calculated at different consumption levels. So at 0 kilowatt hours, the monthly bill is $875, right? And then we did it by 250 kilowatt hour segments. This is our average, at least it was, I think, last year, 1080, 1081, and then it goes higher. Now, what else is on the chart is the cost to serve these customers. The black line is the fixed cost of serving customers. And it's fixed, so it doesn't matter how many kilowatt hours the customer uses, we still incur about $70 per month to serve them, okay? The orange line that's built on top of that adds in the variable cost now. And so the orange is sort of the total cost to serve. Where'd my cursor go? There it is. So this is the total cost to serve because it adds the variable on top of the fixed. And of course, this gets farther and farther away from that black line as consumption goes up because it costs more to serve them that amount of usage. So Reed, I think this is one you had sketched out on a piece of paper, and when we kind of put our head to it and sort of thought about it, it's actually a very interesting view because it shows that if you're a low usage customer, you're not covering your cost of service. You may be covering the variable cost of producing the power, but you're not fully contributing to the cost of the power plants, the cost of our infrastructure to get you the power. And if you're a high usage customer, you're over indexing and you're compensating for those low usage. That's what happens when you have a rate structure that is primarily variable based, like ours is. 93% of our residential revenue comes from the variable charges. Okay, so that is before. That's the before view. And I want you to look at these two bars right here, the 1,000 and the 1081, below the orange line, right? So even on average, my residential customers are not at the orange line. Why is that? Because commercial's helping out, right? To that degree, that little sliver is being contributed by commercial. All right, so this is before implementing any changes in price or rate. This is what we're considering for the new fixed charge on the bill, right? So both residential and PL would go from $875 to $15. Now there's also a change to the energy charge, but it's a very small change. Most of the change is the fixed charge. We're doing the same thing for LLP. ELP actually does pretty well in terms of its monthly charge. This is the cost to serve the customer costs, the meter charge, the billing charge. It's not fixed cost of infrastructure. And so this is what, ideally we're seeking to cover with the service availability charge. Residential, I think you've seen this number before, 2164, right? That's the customer cost of serving a residential customer. It is not the demand cost. You don't have demand charges for them, right? That's about another $50 on average. So anyway, I wanted to give you some detail into kind of how we're thinking about the fixed charge change. So what does that do to the prior chart? Okay, this is the after view. All right, now these two are more at the orange line. Okay, so everybody's gone up, and these guys still aren't fully recovering their fixed cost of service because we don't have demand charges. I'd have to do a flat $70 charge per month for these bars to be up near the orange. Okay, and that's not palatable. So that's how you fix the problem, is you raise the fixed charges by more. Now, there's a side effect of doing that. That side effect is the percentage increase of the bill is higher if you're a low usage customer, okay? Here's what that looks like. So if I increase the fixed charge from 875 to 15 and barely tweak the energy charge up just a little, my low usage customers, and so the way to read this is these are the usage levels and these are the bills calculated before and after a hypothetical rate increase. And these are approximately decile views. So 10% of customers fall into this bucket, 10% into this bucket, or between those two usage levels, and so on. This is the dollar amount of the change and the percent amount of the change. So my percentage, if I'm a customer that uses 250 kilowatt hours a month, my bill right now is $34.74 because I'm only paying an $8.75 base charge, and my variable charges don't add up to much. But after a rate increase and after a slight redesign of the bill, I'm paying $41. Now that's only $6.74 higher, but it's 20%. Okay, so optically that can feel like, well, we're penalizing the low usage customers. Well, it's not a penalty. It's trying to fix the discrepancy in how we recover our costs. And even this amount of fixed charge increase, it's not sufficient, as I just showed you on the prior slide. And then the more you use, the lower the percentage increase, but obviously the dollar change in the bill is higher because they're using much more. Now, I want to be careful because most people assume that low usage equates to low income. So my limited income segment of customers must be the customers that are using very little. And Chad, if you do this type of rate redesign, you're unfairly impacting the limited income segment of customers. That is not the case. We find that our participants in our affordability discount program have very similar usage patterns to the customers that are not in our affordability discount program. And that's what this chart's showing. So it's a histogram of the percentage of bills in different usage buckets. So ADP, I get about, 5.5% of my bills fall below that level of usage, and 7-ish% of my non-ADP bills fall below 250 kilowatt hours. Okay, so that's how to read the chart. What that means is the same proportion of bills are coming from both of these groups at almost every usage level. And that surprises some folks. And the reason for that is that we find a lot of times the limited income segment, they can't afford to make energy efficiency upgrades to their home. Sometimes there's multiple families living in the home and they're using a lot of electricity. And so that's one reason why we invest as part of the STEP program in our Casa Verde program, right? That goes and helps weatherize to some of the low income customers. Okay. That's
All right.
That's the points I wanted to make. And
Okay.
Reed, I'll turn it over to you.
Good. Thanks. Listen, we've got to go ahead and break here. We've got Dr. McGuire. I know there's questions on this. So when we're in our discussions, if you have questions on this, then please feel free to ask them. Now let's go ahead and wait a minute. This thing is recording everything I'm saying. I'm not to stop it. So let's go ahead and see if we can get Dr. McGuire on.
Hello, Reed. Yes, good afternoon. We do have Dr. McGuire online. Dr. McGuire, you'll be unmuted now to provide your input.
Hello, thank you.
This will be timed at 3 minutes, correct? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Meredith Mcguire, retired Trinity University professor and climate justice activist with the local Sierra Club. As a sociologist and author of a major textbook on social factors that influence people's health, wellness, and longevity, I can assert with assurance that CPS Energy's continued production of coal-fired and gas-burning generators for its electricity is a major factor in air pollution, leading to greater amounts of sickness and death than what would occur when our electricity came from renewable energy such as solar and wind-powered electricity. Furthermore, there is a clear and direct connection between high and growing levels of greenhouse gas emissions and the increasing climate change impacts, such as weather extremes of intense and long-lasting heat waves and freak winter storms like February's Uri winter storm. I don't want to go into details about how CPS has failed to deal with its emissions. I do, however, want to remind you that CPS rates are a significant part of the cause of so many deaths because people died when they feared to run an air conditioner during a heat wave since they couldn't afford to pay for the electricity. San Antonio incomes are very low already, having been stagnant for several of the last 10 years. Now, as the cost of living is rising fast, a larger proportion of SA's households cannot afford essential services such as electricity and water. CPS has been telling you that residential ratepayers are not paying their share, with their distorted graphs that compare residential ratepayers with all the businesses lumped together in a single average. CPS rates for industrial users are so very cheap that there is little or no incentive for all those businesses to invest in energy-saving buildings, appliances, and manufacturing process. There is little or no incentive for the heaviest users to invest in distributed energy resources like large-scale battery storage and solar production on-site where little electricity is lost in transmission. Those investments, especially by energy-intensive businesses, can go a long way in reducing the risk of blackouts and the need to build expensive generation plants to improve the capacity of our local grid. Unfortunately, CPS rates are so low for industrial users that they fail to promote true economic development in San Antonio. They do not create lots of well-paying jobs. The profits that those users make don't stay in San Antonio and recirculate in our local economy. CPS rates are attracting the wrong kinds of businesses that locate here only for our cheap energy. I urge you to take a better look at the rate structure and
Dr. McGuire, thank you for your input. I'll now hand over the meeting back to Reed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Dr. McGuire. Oh, can we see all the people? Can we get all the folks that are online on the screen where I can see them? Is that possible? Not possible? Yeah, let's, because we're going to try to go through some process here of people talking, and if I don't know who's actually out there, they come and go, then I won't know. All right, we're gonna each have 5 minutes. Can we get them bigger? All right. So what we're going to do, I understand this is a little clumsy. Some of us are here in person, some are not. We'll kind of start here as you hold your hand up and want to be recognized. I'll call on you. I was warned not to do it in alphabetical order. I don't know why, but that seems to be a concern of people. So let's just open the floor. Who wants to talk first, please? Okay, John, we'll start over here with you.
Hello. Aisha, it's Aisha.
Whoa. Hang on a minute.
Oh, Minetta, is Fawaz there?
What?
My
Okay,
apologies.
go ahead.
That was Anne Marie. Oh, I've muted
Okay.
her.
Yeah, pass the microphones around. Yeah.
Electronic folks.
No, that's perfect. Okay, go ahead. And who's got the timer, or how do they see that? Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
it's very quick because I have two questions really that I think pertain that most of what we're going to discuss, all things flow from these two questions. So as we're sitting here discussing this rate increase, that's really what we're here for. What I want to know is, how long is this rate increase going to last? What are the financial commitments that you think that's going to cover? And when are you going to be back asking for another rate increase? What is this going to cover, basically? The second part of that is, if you don't get a rate increase, what is your backup plan? What are we going to do if we don't do a rate increase? Because I haven't really heard either one of those questions being answered in a meaningful financial way.
Okay, thank you, John. Let me, and that was very good. Let me go through a couple of things just real quick, because I don't plan on speaking, but let's go back and think about what our charges are. And John was dead on. So first, we were supposed to learn about the utility, okay? I think we did that. I think Brattle was good at it. CPS helped us. Secondly, our second responsibility, and this all comes from the Article 2 of Section 1. And the second thing is to understand the rates, which we've done, and provide input. Now, who are we providing that input to? According to the bylaws, we're providing it to CPS Energy's management and the Board of Trustees. And what are we supposed to provide input on? Well, the rate structure, rate design, and proposed rate increase. The third thing we're supposed to do is we're supposed to talk about planning issues. Okay, well, we've started that, but we're going to have to put those off till we get through this rate thing. Those are the three things we got to do. So where are we? Okay, so right now, I think we've got through our first objectives, is our learning objective, but we've still had to come back and concentrate on this rate case. Okay, because this is coming on to us pretty quick. If I looked at the timeline from the time they talk to their board, which is next Monday, it's about 10 weeks. Okay, if I took 70 and divide 7 into it, it comes up 10 weeks. So we've really got to kind of concentrate on that, and then we'll get back on the generation planning. But if you really look at what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to give input. We do not have the authority to approve a rate increase. We do not even have the authority to propose a rate increase. And we really don't have the expertise to evaluate a rate increase. That's Ben Gerzels and his people. That's their job. So what we have to do is exactly what we're doing today, which I think John kicked off very well, is we have to start talking. We are the public. And as you remember the 3 circles we talked about the first time, the authority is with the city council and the board of trustees, the power is with CPS, and we are just influencers from the community. But we have to talk. And so I encourage everybody to use their 5 minutes, and then we'll come back around if we don't use all the 5 minutes, to talk and tell people what we're feeling, because they're expecting us to. We were put here to do that. And from this, we're going to try to figure out what is the most meaningful way to get our voices, if you will, out to the board and to CPS management. So really today in this meeting, we're starting that. John started, did fine. Okay. Who's next? Okay, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, I go back to the first meeting we had. It's fine to see the rate increases, but what is it generating? What requirement are we trying to get to? What 10% is going to go lacking if we don't have a rate increase? So until you know, okay, so we see the rate increases. Okay, so how much is that adding to the bottom line every month or every year? We don't have a clue on what that does. Is that going to be enough to make the 10%? I'm more in line with what's in that 10% that's lacking, and what's going to happen if we don't get that 10%. But I never see the requirements for the 10% that's not covered at this particular time. So now, if you get a bogey over there, get a number, you see what the requirements are. We could argue about the requirements, whatever. But now, does the rate increase provide enough money, or is it twice as much as needed? You don't know that. You can say, well, okay, that looks good for a rate increase, but what are you basing that on? You know, and we know we need it. We know we've heard 10%. So what do we need to marry the two together. This rate increase here is going to give us all the requirements for future requirements, decarbonization, whatever they are that is not on the table right now. So to me, that's kind of where I was hoping we were going to get to so that we can evaluate. Because right now, I can't tell you if the rate is good or not because I don't even know what our target is. I don't know what we're trying to get to. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. We're just kind of come around this way. Who's next? Anybody? Okay. Norm, you got the microphone.
And I don't know if this can be addressed in the current rate increase, but over and over again, well, let me ask, my first question is rhetorical. And I believe that I'll ask, our cost of service analysis, the last time we did it, indicated what you stated earlier, and that is commercial rates are generally overpaying for their cost of service and are in some effect subsidizing residential rates. Is that, I mean, you said that earlier today also, Chad. I mean, I think we all recognize that's a fact. We all recognize the fact that we have the lowest, according to the charts we've seen, basically the lowest residential power rates when you combine electricity and gas in the state. My concern is how far out of whack are we getting with the commercial rates? Is this getting worse and worse on the disproportionate impact of the commercial subsidizing residential to where we're going to become non-competitive on a commercial investment standpoint? I'm just from a long-term perspective, for the good of the economy, for the good of the community, I believe we need to remain competitive in both arenas. But I just don't believe that commercial can continue to subsidize the residential class of service to the degree that they are when we're in a competitive market. We saw those charts showing some of the other cities in Texas that have such a significantly lower commercial rate. And when you're talking a large manufacturer or someone like that uses a large amount of electricity, they can be anywhere in Texas and get the advantage of the other issues that Texas provides. But if they're a large user of electricity, a large manufacturing plant, why wouldn't they go somewhere where they could cut their utility bill in half if their utility bill is a large part of their cost of operation? So again, I know you can't address that in the current rate proposal, but I'm just hoping that we as a committee, when we get back into talking about rate structure in the future, can start to look at that, because I'm concerned about the long-term effects if we continue to get more and more out of line with the commercial rates in other parts of the state.
Is that all, Norm? You got some more minutes if you got anything else.
I also tend to believe that this is a personal thought. I tend to believe in the inclining block rate structure. I believe that the majority of folks that are using large amounts of power are able to potentially be able to afford that inclining block rate. SAWS has been very successful with this, and of course it's a different animal, but the inclining block rate at SAWS inspires conservation of water. And if we're interested, I know we need to sell more power to make more money, but if we're interested in people not wasting power, then my belief is that an inclining block rate at some segment, which is obviously what Austin appears to have, because they flip us at 2,000 then kilowatt hours, then there's I think there's a reason for us to explore that inclining block rate for our residential customers. And I would hope we would be open to looking at that as we go forward with a rate structure. Again, we can't address that in this current rate case, but I think going forward, that's something we really need to consider as a city.
Thank you, Norm. Okay, here in the room, who wants to go next? Dee Dee, please.
Appreciate it. I have a couple of comments and questions that the question may not necessarily be able to be answered right now. But I know the next meeting that we have, we'll be looking at discussing the energy burden of CPS Energy customers. I want to know that as CPS looks into this rate hike, will y'all also be enhancing affordability programs for low-income customers? Also, as we talk about the different classes of customers, we're talking about residential. Are we going to consider the cost of serving apartment complexes or multifamily units and having some type of rate for them? I know that came up today during a city council meeting as they were discussing the new trustees nomination. I know that a couple of council members have brought up multifamily units. So I'd like to see if we can discuss that and compare those, like cost of service of a multifamily unit to, let's say, a 4,000 square foot house, for example. That's all I had.
Well, those are good. And just to follow up what we've talked about, and I think it'll work for the group, is we've got the energy burden discussion next week. The following week, we'll be looking for some feedback from CPS on the questions we're asking tonight. And that'll give them some time to respond to these as opposed to taking up time today. Okay, who's next? Sure, Peter.
I would also like to speak.
Oh, yeah, well, let me just finish the room and then I can't even see the names up there. So I'm going to go through the list here just as soon as I can. Okay. So Peter, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Reed. Peter Onofre. So I represent District 4, and I'm kind of in line with Dee Dee and her comments. And I think that the financial concerns are valid questions that need to be addressed on whether we have the rate increase and the validity, or what if we don't. I think those are very valid questions to be asking. My concern is with the low income impact. And during the most recent Municipal Utilities Committee, the major concern was with the committee members was the impact on low income customers and how we could identify them. With that said, I'd like to submit for the CPS staff and for the RAC's consideration a pilot study be conducted with any rate increase proposal going forward, but starting with this one. And the study would address the direct impact on low income energy burden customers. It will be similar to the Sacramento Municipal Utility District time of use pilot study that was referenced in the Brattle presentation early on in our educational sessions. Theirs was about energy use, but this one would be based on the burden and the impact. The only CPS data metric that I can confirm that we can use for a pilot study related to low income is the Affordable Discount Program. And I had asked that question, and that'll be one of my questions, just to confirm that there's no other metric that's available to identify that low income customer. The study would also shed light on the energy impact for this group, because it would allow us to use this as a pilot to look at that group that we can identify and then see what that energy burden in fact is. And Dee Dee, thanks for sending that energy burden map. And I looked at it and kind of see that, areas in my part of town are heavy in the energy burden. And so it would be good to be able to see how, at least in this group, we could identify how that factors in. One consideration related to this group is how the increase would impact it the most. Which increase, a fixed rate or a variable increase? Because each one would have a different burden. We've talked about that. And you did, again, reiterated that, Chad, as far as how it impacts the low user. And the low income is a different category, but it still has an impact. So the study would be able to, I believe, identify that. And it could be done through a bill comparison process to determine the rate impact on that group. And rate adjustments could be considered at the end of the study based on those things that were revealed through the study. Another group that could be studied is the STEP solar customer. I believe this group is considered that low usage customer that CPS projects would have the greatest increase if we went 100% on the fixed rate. This, if we do that, and I think you referenced this, Chad, that this would be, well, I would expect that it would be a disincentive to the STEP program if we did that. But that's a way that we can address that revenue requirement by adding that fixed rate to that low user group. The studies could provide valuable data for future rate program decisions, and I believe that they could be helpful in revising the future cost of service study class data collection. I don't know when the next study is going to be conducted, but looking at those classes more specifically, where we can go forward and identify these specific groups and be able to address how not only their cost to serve, but the impact of a rate increase. So that's all I've got. And that was my only other question, which I opened up with, which is there any other metric?
So let me ask a question on your verbiage. Are you talking about a pilot study or a simulation off of the bills? Are you actually wanting to implement this and see what the impact, or are you talking about a study that simulates this impact on people?
I'd like the study to be done on, and I'm presuming that this is presuming that there's a rate increase, and the rate increase would incorporate a pilot study on that group that's been identified as low income, the affordable discount program group at this point, unless there's another group.
I'm just trying to get at your definition of pilot, because it's important. Because if we're talking about implementing something and seeing the impact on it, or if we're talking about studying the impact of something before we implement it, which one of those are you talking about?
We're studying it as we're implementing it, and
Studying
then we're
it
taking the
and-
data on the back end.
Okay. So you implement it, you study it. It's something we'd do after the rate increase.
Yes.
I'm just
because-
trying to get clear.
Yes, exactly, Reed, because there's the timeline. That's why I jumped to this, because the
Yeah.
timeline is so short, and the fact that we more than likely will have a rate increase is something we have to deal with. So it would be something we would factor in.
Well, I think that's something that probably we should put on the agenda for next week, because it ties back in with what Eloise is going to be doing next week, and for more discussion, and if y'all can be thinking about that. Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Next, anybody here? So, and then we'll go to
Yeah,
the,
Reed,
oh, yeah, okay, good, Jim. Couldn't see.
down here in the end. All of us, let me just turn down. Everything's going in my hearing with a delay. Now, there. I think all of us are on the same team, and the same team is the team that in 1942 launched off the ownership into the citizens of San Antonio, this magnificent gem that we have here, and that we not jeopardize its existence with infighting or taking up segmented portions of the community's needs. There are going to always be needs within the community from those, whether it's affordability or not. But what we need, what I would encourage those that take the rate increase to the city council, as John suggests, that the credibility not be lost by this team of staff, that this is what is needed to maintain the solubility and the credibility to our bondholders, and that the profitability, or at least the even cash flow of the organization. That's the only thing that's important. Nothing else is important here at all. This organization must survive in its competitive environment, and we have lots of incoming missiles, whether it was the February storm, which we couldn't control, or it's inflation that's suddenly taken gas from $3 to $6 MCF now. And we need to ensure then that what you take to the city council, you need to ensure, we need to ask you to ensure that what you take to the city council is a credible, reasonable accounting of what needs the CPS needs for the future. That's the only thing that's important. All of us have that unified need, period. Otherwise, our little investment here, if it goes away and it becomes a profitable company, or for-profit company, and there is no CPS because it has hurt itself or damaged itself, then if a for-profit company becomes the provider for the citizens of San Antonio, there will not be a RAC. There will be a rate increase, take it or leave it. So we have a privilege here of being able to discuss the ins and outs, but understand that in the end, we need to survive, we need to succeed, and we need to all be part of the winning team. And Reed, that's all I have for you.
Thank you. We're trying to sort all this out on who's on the line. Jim, didn't mean to interrupt your comments or just, okay, let's finish up here in the room. Dana, I don't think you've spoken. Okay, please, go ahead. I just wasn't looking in. It's hard in this room. You can't see everybody. Sorry. Go ahead. You got to hold it down for a minute.
Thank you very much for your help. First of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm considered the new kid on the block. I was not approved until a couple of months
It's
after.
not on yet. Is it? Just put
After
it
the
close.
RAC
There you go.
committee-
Thank
RAC
you.
committee began meeting. And what occurred was that I guess the persons that had been originally recommended from District 3 couldn't commit to the RAC advisory committee. So Ms. Villagrán asked me, well, Brenda, you're it. So here I am. Although I began listening to the meetings prior to being approved by the trustees and board of trust meetings as well. And so you all introduced yourselves and I was very impressed. There are a whole lot of degrees in this room. I think not just in this room, but people signed on. We could probably run a small city, with all the great minds in this group. When she asked me to go ahead and accept the position, I was a little bit intimidated, especially after I saw that first meeting and how we had, degrees in engineering and all those other impressive degrees. And I was a little intimidated, but I know that I was born for a reason. I'm not religious or anything like that, but I was born for a reason. I was born to serve my community. And I thought, what a better way to serve my community than to be on an advisory panel, or whatever you want, advisory committee that is going to help our residents survive in the heat of the summer. And then also if we should have another storm and another disaster, and that's what I call it, a disaster. What can I do to help that? So I said, okay, I'm gonna try. I began to do surveys of all of the people I know all across San Antonio, not just the people in my neighborhood or in my precinct. I started to interview some of my ex-bosses. I worked for a Fortune 500 company. And so I went to some of those directors and I said, have you been listening to the news? You've heard about that there's a potential rate increase. And I hear lately it's about 10%. What do you think? Of everybody that I interviewed or surveyed, they said 10% was too much, but that they knew a rate increase was inevitable. So everyone is expecting it. What I also did hear, though, was that they wanted to be able to understand in very user-friendly terms what the formula is or was that helped create that 10%. And as easy explanation as they can get, they just want to know what was considered to come up with that. I know it's not random, but that percentage. With that, then they would be able to say, I may not like it, but I'll accept it because then they understand. So what I have done is I have gone to many of the neighborhood associations in my precinct and I've asked CPS Energy spokespersons to come and speak to them and answer their questions directly because it's really difficult to be the middleman or liaison in something like this, because I probably could get it wrong. So I've asked them to speak to community organizations, neighborhood associations, so that they get the information straight from the source and it's going to be correct. I hope, though, that with what I've seen, on at the previous meetings and some dialogue most recently, that I will be part of a group that is going to share, converse, and be honest, but also respectful of each other, because that is what I'm accustomed to. I'm not the most brilliant mind in this group, but I work well with others. I play well with others. And I want to be able to, after this is all done, say, you know what, I did what little I could, and I'm kind of proud of that. And I think we did the best we could. And that's what I am hoping will be the final answer with regard to this particular group. And so thank you very much. I went ahead and I took it upon myself to call a couple of you when I had questions previously, but I wasn't official. And I want to thank you for taking my calls, because you didn't have to, and answering my simple questions. So Jim and Dana and Dee Dee, I appreciate that. I really do, because you didn't have to take my calls or answer my questions, but I did appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Well, Brenda, we're very happy to have you, and thank you for your work in the community. It's huge. Okay, we got this. We got one more here, and then we'll go out into the cloud. No, we got two. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
You want to? Yeah, go.
All right, well, not to overstate everything that is being said, I mostly agree with it, but on the affordability discount, can that be redefined, the parameters? I mean, if we're going to, the biggest concern is on the low income. We all know that there's going to be a price increase. We can control some of it by our own use. But in caring for the low income families that are in San Antonio, can that affordability discount program be redefined so that the lowest of income can actually get more, and then lower the ceiling where some just won't get that low discount anymore? It's $8. I mean, right now we're talking about a $7 increase approximately to the low income, but we're giving them a discount of $8.75. So the $8.75 that we're giving them now, we're actually just taking it back in that. So I'm just saying, what would happen if we redefine that, tighten it a bit? Some will get a little bit more and others won't get it anymore. And how does that play? And other than that, I'm letting this play out, and we'll have more comments later. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. And again, I think there'll be more discussion on that point next week, because it's dead on with the affordability issue. So hopefully we'll get some answers back to your questions so we can proceed on that next week. Okay, last one in the room is, here you go, Dane.
Thank you. It's been mentioned recently by Brenda that if we can just get all the facts out on the table and tell people what happened, why we need a rate increase, then people will likely do it. And I agree with that. And I think this committee has not yet had all the information, and that's why it's, at this point, I think it's more than just a rate advisory committee, because we don't have enough information to be able to advise on what the rate might be. As an example, there's held in abeyance several $100 million, which is not in this rate increase, that we spent during the freeze. We need to sort of make sure everybody understands that if that's not successful, then there's going to be another rate increase. And it's been my opinion, and I think it's pretty obvious actually, that the policy that CPS has been going down for several years with retiring dispatchable energy plants rightly or wrongly, and adding renewables is not working. Meaning the system is slowly degrading, and it will degrade more if you close another coal plant, if you add more wind and solar that you can't rely on when it's going to come on board. And frankly, you haven't told us what that costs you either and how you ramp up or add on the PPA costs. So you just mark that up, but is that arbitrary? So I think it would be important for this committee in considering the rate increase for you to lay out a plan of how you can ensure reliable power in the future. And right now, if you look around the world, what's happened, in Europe, where they've gone further than even CPS. And I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It's just look what's happened, and it's not working over there. We could learn by other people's mistakes before we continue on the path that so far has not been working. So that's what I think CPS needs to lay it out, tell people what happened, why we need a rate increase, and what might happen in the future, with the rest of the stuff, and what might happen if we go ahead with, for instance, the current flex path, which in my opinion is not going to work either. So if you think it's going to work, you need to lay out a reason why it's going to work and what it's going to cost. And if you can do all that, then you can put a number on what the rate increase is probably going to be. And then we get back to the point, if you could tell people that, then they'll understand. But don't be in a position to say, well, we need a rate increase now, we need a rate increase in 6 months, and next year because of this and that, we need another rate increase. Just don't do that.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, I appreciate the patience for the people up there. Unfortunately, there's such small pictures, I cannot recognize everybody. And I see two hands, and who's the, okay, I know, I'll start with the lady. Who is the lady next to Kurt? Is that Anita? I got you in the room.
I think it's me.
Okay, Anita, I got you in the room. I'm sorry. Go ahead, start Anita, and then we'll go to Kurt.
So first, I'm going to try to be brief here, but let me say I really appreciate, this discussion. And Reed, I want to thank you also for kind of reintroducing, like, why are we here? I think it's always important to kind of revisit that so we understand where our impact can be. In terms of providing a commentary about this process, CPS Energy, I know that, I'm not prepared to say every single thing I think right here, right now, but I definitely am going to formalize from Build San Antonio Green kind of our take on things and submit that whenever that's appropriate at the end of this process. But I will say this, I think that what's important for me is to stay on mission. Let me put it this way, to stay on mission. And, I don't know if Femi is around anywhere, but Femi said something at our first meeting that again, I'm going to bring it back up because I think it was very important for me, and it provides a framework. And that is, what are our short-term and long-term, goals and investments, really? Because here's the thing, I think sometimes it's hard to see, that's why Einstein has that saying, it's hard to see the forest for the trees, right? So there's so much technical detail and so much, cost analysis, and there's a lot here to unpack. But I think, for myself, I try to remember, where are we going and why, and how do we stay on mission? So here's kind of my top things. Number one, I laid out, I think it's important for us to differentiate between short-term and long-term investments, with the understanding that we are transforming not only as a utility, but the nature of the grid and the Texas market are definitely going to impact us here. We talked about this. Decisions that were made 20 years ago are impacting our rates right here, right now, and will continue to do so as we've moved away from a capacity market. And other groups have put on large renewables that are outside of our grid and so on. It's a complicated thing, but that's one. Number two, I try to look at what are the Achilles heel of this process in our community. And so I hope that our consultants and CPS are listening right now to really kind of talking to you. Number one is, back to, I know that we calculate weather that, basically on 30 years historical data. We're going to have to try to figure out how to redo that in the future, because as we all know, one of the big Achilles heel to things is the probability of more extreme weather events in the future, and our ability to predict them, respond to them, and integrate systems across that's a broader conversation than just what we're here to do right here, right now. And yet, as a long-term investment or middle-term investment strategy, it will greatly impact the people of San Antonio, quality of life, and our costs long-term. Second part of this is, well, let me kind of also say, basically another Achilles heel in all of this that we talk about is the variable cost of fuel moving forward over time. And I think that a couple of people have talked about this also, and that is communicating this to the people of San Antonio. I mean, I think that, that's a big goal for me. I would love to see CPS Energy be able to come out with a simplistic, this is how the utility operates, that presentation to city council. I imagine this, we should be able to get up there and in a couple of slides say, this is how we operate. This is what has changed, what our problem is, and then this is our suggested course of action. I feel like that is something, we should be able to boil that down so that people can understand it. And I do think that there's a lot of confusion because there's a lot of moving pieces, right? I mean, we've all been engaged in this in a while, and we still have a million more questions. Another part of that, and I know this keeps being talked about, is equity, and affordability and the energy burden here in our community. What I would like to advise, CPS Energy and our consultants is that when we talk about equity, I think that we should use data as a tool for that, because we can map things out. And this kind of goes back to kind of a major thing I want to talk about is that, we have a lot on our plate because, we've also committed as a community to our SA Climate Ready Plan. The city council has voted on that. I know Femi and I were co-chairs of it, and I can tell you from that experience, the top three takeaways. One, it's, we committed to net zero carbon by 2050. But obviously we talked about mitigation strategies.
Anita, you're at 5 minutes.
Okay, well, then I'll submit my comments in writing, but, because I have a lot to say, but I thank you for your time.
Well, we'll have some time. We'll probably go back around again. So just put a little pin in that one where you were. All right, Kurt, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll have more clarity on revenue requirements and the justification for rate increases when we get more clarity from management on goals. And what happens at these meetings is a lot of individual issues are raised, fragility of the grid. I mean, Reed, you tackled this as a chair of that emergency committee. You came up with some good ideas on, who should be on uninterruptible circuits, who needs, generators in what spots and all that. We can't control fragility of the whole Texas grid as it impacts us, but we can help mitigate it with local measures. And there's a cost to that. I don't know what it is, probably not a lot, but after all these months, I still don't. I'm not sure what it is. We talk a lot about, what implicit in some of the points made tonight when we talk about having more of a fixed element for rates for residential and, maybe commercial is overpaying versus residential. Implicit in that is a principle, I think, that's kicking around saying we need to close some of those deltas between the different categories of ratepayers. I don't know what the goal is on that, but that's going to necessarily impact what we do with a rate structure and rate increases. We talk about affordability, extremely important. We have a bucket called affordability. What is our goal on that? What exactly are we trying to accomplish there? And that will have teachings on what the rate structure should be. We talk about renewables. We all want, I think everybody in this call wants lower greenhouse gas emissions. We're looking for lower carbon solutions. But, just willy-nilly to add renewable capacity, no one would be in favor of, because it's not practical, it's not technically feasible. It's going to, cause financial problems, I believe, to CPS to do that. Yet we want to lower greenhouse gas emissions, and how can we do that in a financially responsible way? Then, of course, we have all the financial metrics that people have mentioned. If you want to maintain our city-owned utility, you've got to be financially sound. Otherwise, you're going to have a very different animal coming in as the power company locally. So I'll stop there. There's a whole list of these. I've listened to them for months, but I think what's missing, and maybe in the coming weeks we could sharpen a pencil on this, is to have have leadership and management come up with goals in each of these areas that will enable us to sort of back calculate what we need as a rate structure and revenue for the organization to be viable.
Thank you, Kurt.
That's it for me. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, don't see any hands okay.
I've got my hand up, Reed.
Okay, I'm sorry, Anthony. They don't have names underneath there, and they're so small. My eyes are so bad. But I think that's you, Anthony, that held your hand up.
Can you hear me? Go ahead. I had my hand up too, Reed. This Jack.
Okay, Jack, I'm sorry you weren't. I didn't see you on the screen. You'll be next. Let's get Anthony.
Okay. My basic concern is that in the presentation, they indicated that they would go on the base rate from $8.50 to $15. And one of the, I guess, measures were the fact that by going to $15, I guess where I'm having a little bit of the struggle here is that we're not really defining, particularly in our low income customers, people who live in subsidized housing, people who live in the oldest housing stock. It's hard to talk about segments of our customer base that might not align with conservation, and yet we're going to put them in this $15 base price component. I think it's really important for us to do some research to find out exactly what our complex residential housing stock exists, because you can live in the inner city, be a high consumer, but live in some of the worst housing circumstances. And I think it would be important for us to kind of find out through census tract information, so that as we unfold these challenges from $8.50 to $15, people have a better understanding how it impacts them. The other thing I'd like to bring up too is the fact that being a municipally owned utility has a lot of benefits to our ratepayers. It's important for us, I think, to convey what our history has been in terms of rate increases, perhaps even over a 30 or 40-year period. Because when people can see that CPS is among the lowest rates of major Texas cities and competitive with Austin, and it has been like that for decades, it helps create a sensate that maybe things are not as bad, because we've always been competitive. We've always worked hard at the bottom line to ensure that our rates were competitive. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's my opinion.
Okay, Anthony, thank you. It does make sense. Okay, next in line is Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. One of the things I went back to try to put my hands around is a cash flow. And we did on September 9th, they talked about some sources and uses, but they're spread across many tables and charts, and it's hard to really see. And I wish we could understand, how much cash do we have in the bank today? And, over the next 24 months, what are our, we have sources, we have rate income and we have borrowing capacity and, you know, whatever other items we have. I'm not talking about 50 lines, but you could 3 or 4 major lines and then group everything else together. And then, you know, what are our sources? I mean, our uses. We got to pay for generation. We got to pay for distribution, transmission, maintenance, overhead. We have to make interest payments, debt payments. And to really understand, you know, in a simple chart, maybe over 12, 24 months, you know, if we don't have a rate increase, where does that put us? I would love to see that. It would help me better understand what's ahead of us. And I think it's a simplified way. We do it all the time in business. I live by cash flow. I don't live by financial statements. I would like to see that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jack. Well, this is a cash flow business because there's no depreciation in a non-tax paying company. So I'm going to try to summarize, and then we're going to go back around to what I'm picking up to see if I'm getting our basic takeaways. If I'm not, I expect to get corrected right off. Okay. There's a little picture. I think it might be Anne Marie that's holding her hand up. This is really hard for me to see. I apologize. I think that's her. Anne Marie, is that you? Where's Femi? I think that's Anne Marie. Yeah, turn your voice on. We can't hear you.
I'm somewhere here, Reed, in the
Okay,
lime
well,
green t-shirt.
okay, Femi, let's let Anne Marie get her voice on, and then we'll come to you, Femi.
All right.
Anne Marie, please. You're on.
Anne Marie, we cannot hear you. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Can somebody somebody text her or communicate with her that we can't hear her?
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and send her a chat message. In the meantime, can we have Dr. Femi?
That'd be perfect. Let's go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Reed. I'm going to be very direct with my questions, and I'll just ask them without any supporting type of explanation because I might end up answering my question myself. But my first concern, they're mostly concerns. I want to believe that, first of all, you know, CPS is taking notes of our questions because those are questions that we'll come back to specifically wanting answers. My first question or concern has to do with the 2016 cost of service study. Now, I'm specifically asking what metrics does CPS have to show that cost of service study, which was done 6 years ago, is still valid today. We want, at least I'm looking for specific metrics that would say, here's 2016, here's 2021, this has changed, and what has and has not changed. My second question is really coming back to the affordability issue. You know, if CPS Energy wants to create a new or a rate class that's not based on its cost of service study, but based on affordability, how would CPS Energy go about doing it? I mean, those are specific how questions, you know, step by step or whatever approach you want to take, because we're all talking about affordability, and it's coming back to that question of how do you do that? How does affordability become the criterion rather than, you know, other than cost of service? My third concern is that I'd like CPS Energy to be very clear as to how this rate increase helps us to improve or help CPS to improve its performance and response to a future winter storm event as we had in February. That's the real risk that lies ahead of us, and we want to know specifically how this would help resolve that question or that risk. And finally, I brought this up in the previous meeting. We have this pandemic bad debt that is presumably going to be recovered over a 5-year period. And my question to CPS is that, do you believe or have you created a moral hazard whereby folks who know that this will be covered anyway by some rate increase, but can afford to pay their bills are not paying it? Do we have that moral hazard? And how does CPS Energy intend to mitigate or deal with that moral hazard? Those are my questions. And of course, we are happy to discuss and expand on them when we get to the opportunity for further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Femi. Yeah, I think we are going to have some time and we'll come back to those. Okay, now let's see if we can get back to Anne Marie and we can hear her.
Hi, Regis. We're still working on getting her dialed in.
Okay, all right. Then let's see. I've got an RR and a JH, but that doesn't tell me much.
Michael Kennick, I'm online.
Huh?
Michael Kennick is ready.
Okay, Michael, good. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I'll keep it brief because I think a
No,
lot of what I have to say
you got time. You got time.
other
Go.
folks are saying. Okay, so the main thing at hand here is talking about this current rate increase, but I think going back to what we've said, the real long-term solution is rate design and rate restructuring. And I won't go into all that because that's a future conversation, but I do agree with what folks are saying about, tiered service availability. I mean, about the block increasing. I think when we look at our service availability charge in the future, we don't have time for it now. We need to look at having tiered levels for that service availability charge so that lower consumers will have a lower service availability charge. So those folks on solar will have a lower service availability charge to take care of some of those concerns. I think long term, we also need to look at bill redesign to make it more understandable. Current trend I'm hearing people talk about and that I keep thinking about is in so many areas, we need things more understandable to the public, how we do our rates, how they're built, what their bill means, what the goals of CPS are. We need to really clarify a lot of things for the public. And I think another future thing that we definitely need to look at is future power sources. So those are really the long-term solutions. But right now we're charged to give our opinion on a current rate increase. And I believe that a 10% rate increase is too high. I think we need to figure out a way to do a minimal rate increase until we can actually have redesign, restructuring of our rates and how we charge people. So I would encourage the CPS staff to, come up with a minimal number and try to increment that in small increments until we do rate redesign. Another thing, and I know people don't, at least the city council doesn't want to hear this. One of the things that we may want to look at as a temporary step to solve some of these problems is at least a partial decrease, a one-time, maybe 2 years on the city transfer. At 13%, we have the highest city transfer of all municipal utilities. Other similar municipal utilities have an 8% transfer rate. So maybe we look at a temporary decrease in that transfer along with a very small rate increase to shore things up until we can do real rate redesign. So that's the gist of what I had to say. The other thing while I'm thinking about it is Brenda, welcome to our group. Please don't be intimidated by any of what you read on people's credentials. Your view is just as important as anybody else's on this group, and we all have things to provide, and we desperately need different points of view from different backgrounds. So welcome, Brenda, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Michael. I think everybody in this room would like to be out where you are, but we're not. Okay. So, all right, let's go on. I think we've got Eloisa, but I don't see her name up there. I'm just guessing that she's up.
I'm here. Do you hear me? And also,
I
did
do.
you? Okay. Did you also
I can
want
see
to
you now. I can see you.
Awesome.
I don't know where you're coming from, but you got there. Okay, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay, great. And I also remember we're still working on Anne Marie, right? So we don't
Yeah.
forget about her. I have a couple of questions, both in general and then also about today's presentation. And I think it all kind of ties together. And so some of the basic questions as I was looking back at all the materials that we had reviewed in all the presentations previously, And, you know, some of the things that initially came up was all these, you know, the principles that go into rate design. And so I really would like to have some clarification about what rate design principles were used in developing the rate design that we are talking about today. I really would like to know what were the goals that really guided a lot of these decisions. And although I saw some information, I felt like there were some gaps in that information, and it didn't necessarily paint the whole picture for me. And so I want to know if some of specifically the storm, the pandemic, the economic downturn, and instability, how that played a role in the goals and the principles that were in place. The next kind of thing I really want to highlight is the residential rate. There was something that just keeps, you know, sticking out to me, that we keep using the residential rate and we'll reference the primary residential rate when there are more than one residential rate. And I think it's important to understand those different residential rates, including comparing them and really understanding what message are we sending with the different rates, and also just the different goals there around those rates. And so I also want to point out that although we have this affordability discount that's $8.55, this rate increase, right, is going to be double the amount of that affordability discount, right? It goes from, I believe, $7 or $8 to $15, and so that doesn't really allow for the affordability discount really is gone at this point. And so really want to dive in deeper into what that means. The other thing is that today we talked about the STEP is built into the fuel adjustment. On slide 10, we were referencing 1,000 kilowatt hour residents. I really think I'd like to be able to dive in deeper into the number of highest and lowest users, and who are those residents, right? I really want to talk about how many are in those different categories. On slide 11, we talked about Dallas rate all of a sudden kind of shooting higher than the others. And I think there is something to say that Dallas has already started to incorporate the winter storm into their rates. And so that should be really noted on that slide so that we are comparing apples to apples. On slide 12, I really would like to know the number of the highest users. I think it's going to be important. We keep trying to design for the middle, but we really need to talk about some of the highest users. And if we have goals around conservation, let's address that more specifically, as we address also the affordability, and really redefining and really setting goals around what that means. The other thing is, when you were talking, Chad was talking on slide 16 about it takes a lot of years, right? This is a small step in the right direction. That really kind of worried me, because I keep thinking about how long does this rate increase actually last? We're here for 2 years. How are we actually impacting that rate increase? How are we thoughtfully providing input into that rate design? So I really want to make that super clear. And if there is a lot of years, how long is this rate increase going to actually be in place for before something else is going to be put in, before something else is developed? And so I think it's going to be important to understand the long-term impacts. And then I'm going to also go back to something that's been touched upon by everybody, is utility burden and the affordability. And if people can't afford to pay their bills now, they're not going to afford to pay the additional fees that are being asked of them. You can't squeeze blood out of a rock, right? So we really need to think about what are we doing in our current rate structure and programming and design that perpetuates this kind of instability, financial instability for CPS. All in all, I also think that this is a wonderful, smart group, but I really think that there should be a third party really evaluating this rate increase in more detail, and really thinking and highlighting what are the goals and principles so that we can actually have a more informed opportunity to provide impact. I think that what we've gotten so far is kind of snippets, and we don't necessarily have the big picture. I would feel better if we had a third-party evaluator really looking at this rate increase and looking at how it impacts various customers and ratepayers in the city. And I think that's my time.
Okay, thanks, Eloisa. We're still, have we gotten Anne Marie back online where she can talk?
Hi, Reed. We're still working on it. She logged out, but she's going to log back in.
Okay. Is there anyone that we've missed on this first round? Okay. Now, let's take the second.
Reed, I'm sorry. Oh, I believe we have Seymour as well.
Where I'm sorry, I haven't seen him. If Seymour's here, let's go.
Hey, Reed, this is Seymour. I am here. I'm listening. I'm actually commuting right now, so I'm going to defer on comments right now.
Say that again, Seymour. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I am here. I'm listening. I'm actually commuting. I'm driving right now, so let me defer on comments for the moment.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Seymour. I'm sorry. This is extremely. We're gonna fix this. I'm not sure how because I'm technologically challenged. So anyway, let's go back through on this next round, and let's talk about some of the major points I'm hearing from people. And the first one that whether you look at the comments from John Agatha in the beginning, Norm hits on it, Peter hits on it, several people hit on it, and they're wanting to see a cash flow. Okay, this is a cash business. We did have a small part of one when we were going through all of the operating costs, and then the cash part of the cash. So, but that was that was a lot of lines. So I think one of the takeaways, if we can in 2 weeks, and I'm open here for people jumping them down or throwing something at me if I'm speaking out of turn. But I do think that we do need to see that cash flow simplified and spread out over, 5 or 6 years. This will get to John's question of, if we do this, how long would it work? And then if it doesn't, how quick are you going to get back? Okay. And if you don't get it, what's going to happen? So that's pretty important. And then that's also, yeah.
Reed,
Sure.
if I could,
I don't know.
here I am. Right here.
Okay. Sorry. Use your name. They're
Jim
coming from
Burke.
all directions.
In addition to the cash flow, oh, I hate this.
I'm sorry.
In addition to the cash flow, I don't know that I've ever seen a P&L from CPS. And it's so important, as you know, certainly, Reed. What we're talking about are rates. What are rates? Rates are revenue, right? Period. So if we don't have a P&L, the top of which is revenues, and then the costs go below that, and we need to see, I think that we need to, not only in addition to what Jack has been saying about sources and allocations of cash, but what's the P&L situation of this organization? And when there is a rate increase, how will that impact the P&L? Because our bondholders that are paying for this whole thing look at the P&L before they look at anything. So I think please include that.
Yeah. Great point. That you can put that on the schedule. We got a CPA sitting over there and a rate person, so I don't think we're going to have the lack of ability to do that, and that's fine. But let's put some history in so we can see that if there's a deterioration of this, how it's deteriorated. When we get if I can add 10 weeks to this, my guess is that this rate increase, if it happens, is going to happen about the first month of the fiscal year for 2022, right? Am I getting the right years? No, 2021, 2023. Yeah. Okay. You'll see on here and we'll bring you up several years coming up to this. The first year of the rate increase will be 2023, and then you'll drive it out for us several years with your projections, right? And that's going to help several people, including me. Now, on a couple of Femi's questions are going to be really important, and he brought it up. Jack touched on it. Al touched on it. There's several people. Dana touched on it. Anita, if we have, and of course Kurt did too. If we have a philosophy, let me back up. I guess just looking at everybody's questions here, how much of this rate increase is going to take care of the winter storm? How much of it is going to improve our performance and overcome future problems? That goes back to a large extent to a little bit in the operating and a little bit in the capital. But if y'all can look at that and then help us with the answer to that, is this rate increase just covering labor costs that are going up or just covering material costs? How much of it is actually improving the operations? I think I get that from several people. And you can tie that in with what Kurt's talking about with the philosophy and what you're trying to do. I know we're putting some money into a new distribution program in case we have to distribute power. So if you could bring out those particular parts of the capital budget that would do that, and if you can bring out what will be covered from the winter storm, so that, as Jim and Dana both said, we're comparing apples and apples, right? And we're knowing what's in it. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of discussion, and I'm glad we're dedicating 3 hours to the whole affordability issue. Norm brought up step rates like we have it at SAWS. We were both very involved in that. We do know that it does promote conservation. It doesn't necessarily help low-income people in my work. I mean, I haven't seen that it does that, but it is a conservation. And of course, other people might have other opinions, but I do think we need, when we get to the bill impact, I know we said we're going to double the fixed cost almost, but of the 10% that's going to go out there, how much of that is in the fixed and how much is in the variable? We didn't tie that circle back around unless I saw it, unless I missed it. I mean, you could kind of imply that about 80 with the increase and going down through there, and it's different with different rate when you hit different volumes. But people are going to want to know that. How much of this is that? The long and short term that Anita was talking about is really important. Today, we're looking at a short-term rate increase. I mean, we're short-term problem of a rate increase, and we all need to understand how long it's happening. Now, I see Anne Marie back on. I'm hoping that we've got her video problem solved and that we can see her on the big screen when she starts talking. Hello, Anne Marie. Did we solve it? Somebody's going to have to help me because I can't do any more.
Yes, Rita, I will give her a call. We just connected.
You what? Okay, thank you so much. Well, I tell you what, if we don't have these IT folks, we are really in trouble today, folks. So, buy them a cup of coffee or something. Okay. I think Wayne's concerns could get helped a lot with this cash flow thing too, and separating the pieces out. Let me go back around again. People, raise your hand when you want to talk. I don't want to call on people, and let's talk about if in 2 weeks, if we can get a really good cash flow, we can start looking at some of the objectives, and we can answer some of the questions like Femi had. Is this cost of study still good? Because It's 6 years old. Yeah, sure. Just go for it. That's all we're doing.
Reed.
Yeah, go ahead, Norm.
Chad, the other thing I was curious about, we've seen these horrendous numbers of past due accounts and amounts. But one thing I don't remember seeing is an aged accounts receivable. I know you guys have it. I'm not going to ask, I'm not asking you to produce something you don't already have, but I've got to believe that, it would help me to know those numbers. I mean, I've had a bill due on the 20th that I've mailed on the 18th that might not have gotten in till the 21st. Did I fall into the 0 to 30 day, what I mean? So I'm trying to, you're going to collect 98% of your 0 to 30s. And, anyway, I know you've already got that, but I think it would help me to see how bad the write-offable numbers are compared to the likely to collect numbers.
And maybe is that already in the ratings? And that maybe is that already some of that in the rating, suggested rate increase? As an example. And how much?
Sorry. Thank you, Al. Currently, it's about $25 million a year over 5 years. So it's a total of about $130 million. The past due accounts right now is around $125 million, is my recollection. So
That's in the rate increase. What about the collection rate? Are you collecting from those people?
Yeah, let me ask the question a little bit differently. Normally, we write off and put in the rate about how much a year? I think that's what he's getting at.
normally it's about 10 million a year.
Okay, so we got the 10, plus we got this 120 on top of that that's behind.
And
So
so-
when we say we're gonna write off 120 over 5 years, you could do the math, we're thinking we might collect 50 of the 120, or somebody's gonna have to give us an idea, we're talking here, of this 125, how much of that do we really think we're collecting? I mean, we saw that if some of these folks that didn't know, but less than 2,000, once they paid off about 30-something% of it, they just wrote the rest off. So I think we're all kind of grabbing at straws as to, from a philosophy standpoint, from a debt standpoint, what are you looking at?
So
Not only grasping at straws here, but you haven't explained, so you're going to write off 125 million, which is owed now. What happens to those people? They keep going in arrears? Are they cut off? I mean, what happens? Did it stop? And how so?
So we are in the process of resuming our disconnect process. So eventually, if you're not paying, you go through our disconnection process. I don't have the specifics, Dana, but we can give it to you.
You've got some folks that are
We have
responsible for
folks
that.
that have that
can-
information.
They can
Dana.
come talk.
Yeah. And so I also want to point out, we are forecasting how much bad debt is going to come out of these aged accounts. What's aged right now is about 125 million, but we are expecting more to age. The pandemic is not over, and so there's a forecast of how much more is coming. So it will go from about 10 million a year. It'll add on another 25, so it'll be 35 million a year for 5 years. That's our projection. That's about 1 percentage point out of the 8 to 10 percentage points. But that's not a fixed number. That's just our projection. We're going to track the actuals. It'll be a cost tracker just like fuel is. So if it comes in half of what we're forecasting, then we will only collect half of what we're telling you we're going to collect. Does that make sense?
Did I hear Anita's voice out there or somebody else? Oh, Jack.
I'm trying to
Jack's
follow-
raising his hand. Jack, go.
Okay.
Okay.
It's me.
Yeah,
I'm trying to,
Jack. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not raising my hand.
Oh, it's Femi. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to follow up on exactly what Chad, I believe, has just said. And please correct me if I'm wrong. When you say write off, I look at it as this write off hits the bottom line. If you're trying to recover a bad debt through rate increase, you're essentially passing the cost on to other people, not writing it off as in a hit on profits or net income. So if I'm mistaken, please, I'd like to be corrected.
You are correct.
You're correct. We really don't have net income. Okay. Anything that's left over goes back in the R&R account after we've paid the city 14%. So when we're talking about, this whole idea, remember the metrics we need to keep focusing on is how much cash we have in reserves, how much of capital we're funding with cash as opposed to borrowings, and where are our borrowing levels. Those metrics, those three things that we watch, we got to watch. So now, yes,
So-
I'm
so
coming
what
to
that
you, Anne
means-
Marie. Yes,
Sorry.
just a second, just a
Okay.
second. Please, Femi, go ahead.
So what that means, therefore, is if there is a sliver of those drivers of rate increase that has to do with a recovery, that should not be there, because we shouldn't be paying more in our bill increase, not rate increase, a bill increase, in order to recover the costs for bills that have not been paid. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if maybe I didn't say it clearly enough.
No,
If
you
it's
said
been
it.
written off, it is going to CPS's bottom line, not
Well,
my bank account.
But again, CPS, the bottom line, CPS bottom line is our pocketbook. Okay, we're the ratepayers. So if they don't recover the money that they have not collected, it comes to us.
Right, so
There's
it shouldn't be. So it's not a
there's no
write-off.
other
Then
place.
it's essentially a recovery.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I know we've got a hand up, but before we get to Anita, I'm trying to get back and see if we can hear from Anne Marie, if she's where we can hear her.
Okay, let's try this one more time. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
we got it. Thank you. Yay. Yeah, we're nothing. We're not persistent. We're nothing. Go ahead, Anne Marie. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm talking kind of softly because it is 1:30 in the morning where I am. Um, so I'm just going to be real quick. I have two things that I wanted to bring up that weren't mentioned at all. The first one is when they went through the residential bill, there's also a charge called peak capacity charge, and that was not on that example. I'm wondering about that charge. Um, and then I'm almost afraid to ask this one, Reed, because I feel like our other new member, I'm just so far out from everybody else. But this just keeps reoccurring to me. And it's how much of an impact is some of the reallocation of the 14% that CPS pays to the city. If my memory is correct, there was a reallocation of some of those funds and into some other programs, and which actually changed that percentage of contribution to the city budget. And I'm just wondering how much of that, if any, that action has impacted not just where the money is right now for what goes into the city and what it needs and what it expects from CPS. Because I think that's part of this conversation too. I do agree that it is really important to distill this information down simply. I know that the staff is really wonderful, but they are such experts that we get provided with so much information in their attempt to give us everything that they think we may need. They want to satisfy our needs. Sometimes we get just too many details. And I agree with one of the other RAC members that putting something very simple before City Council that people can understand is going to be critical, because I do think we all know that an increase is needed, and it can be a bitter pill to swallow, but it'll go down a lot easier with information. And the history of increases will also be an important part of that component. So that's what I have to say for right now in my short little speaking space. But I made it. Yay!
Yeah. Well, thank you for staying up so late, and connecting from around the world. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to just check across the top here. Folks have to turn their video on, and they got to wave at me if there's something that.
Reed, this is Adrian. I'm sorry. I see Michael Sanchez's hand raised in WebEx. I'm not sure if you provided his
I
input.
can't see it. I mean, I'm sorry, folks.
No worries.
I'm
No
seeing
worries.
half of it. So let's certainly we need to go to Michael, please. Michael.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have the video camera on my computer, but nevertheless, I can still talk and hear everybody. And for those with video cameras, I can see them. 100% grateful for being allowed to participate in the rate advisory committee. You know, Chad, Ann, and all the CPS staff have done a lot of the heavy lifting. Thank you. Thank you for getting all these presentations to us. And Reed, today, thanks for refocusing us. We'll probably need it again in the future. I guess I got a little bit more smaller view right now, a little bit myopic view. Well, I agree with a lot of the bigger questions, like, yeah, we do need to see P&Ls and understand that this is a cash business. And yes, I really would like to see how if the cost of service study is still valid. I was looking at one of the charts that was sent out today, and I'm just trying to look at, okay, well, I'm seeing like a roughly $70 to $75 fixed cost. And so I just got a little bit more myopic type questions, you know, like, do all customers pay fixed costs regardless of usage or solar credits? And I think that was answered as far as everybody pays a fixed cost, but do solar customers also pay a fuel adjustment charge? I don't know about that. And theoretically, if all customers go solar and all solar customers are paying that $70 fixed costs, is the wholesale, just if we all went solar, is the wholesale income volume enough to sustain CPS, or are there other means of incomes to CPS? So those are some of the questions I got. I guess it's more focused on the bill. Is it also possible to have a rate that where the commercial customers don't have to subsidize the residential customers? Can we make it more proportional? In other words, to remain competitive, to keep businesses coming here. Lately, it seems that San Antonio keeps on losing opportunities for some of these bigger business to come to San Antonio. So those are just some of my concerns at this point. I'm sure I'll have a lot more later on, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sorry I wasn't able. We're going to figure out some other way to get a queue better where we can see it. And next time I want to bring, I don't know, telescope or something. Anyway, we'll get it figured out. But that's very important. You mentioned again the cost of service model. That's very important because if you allocate the cost to the wrong group, you're going to get the wrong result when you actually decide who's paying too much or too little. So as we've always talked, we've got the revenue requirement, we got the allocation, then we got the design of the bill. And I'm hopeful that when we have the meeting next week, Eloisa will be leading it, that we talk a little bit more in depth about the design of the bill. I understand that the only change, and again, this is just throwing it out, the only change that I have been understood to be proposed in this is to shift more into the fixed costs. You're not looking at changing like to a step system. You're not looking at charging netting meter folks more of a fixed cost. So this is the only change you're making. But that change is going to get a lot of scrutiny, and I think all of us need to understand that. Well, let's go back around the room, because right now, with the kind of the takeaways, and if y'all will also call me or text me if you see some other takeaways we need to do in 2 weeks, because we're going to have another session just like this in 2 weeks. I'll have to be online, and then that'll really be fun. We'll get somebody else to run it. It's got better eyes than me. But we got to get this cash flow understood. We've got to understand the cost of service. We've got to understand the impact on folks with this fixed charge increase. And is there other things that y'all are concerned about that you would like to come back in 2 weeks and discuss more? Reed. Yes, Jim.
Someone in the room recommended or thought that we could alter the 14%. Is that not in the indenture? Is that not in stone and that's not something for discussion?
Well, in the indentures, the time I read it, maybe it's changed since I looked at them. It was up to 14% is the wording. Okay. God, can't believe it. No, I don't think there's a minimum. Because I remember reading the indentures, it was up to 14%, but I could be wrong.
No, you're correct.
Isn't that going from $1 million a day, like I think it's 365 million to like 441 million? And if you have a company that's already in distress and you're taking 14% off the top, off the gross, I just don't see how you're going to survive.
Okay, that's a great point. Well, no. What he's saying is if we drive the revenue up, it's on the revenue. Okay, so it's on the top line. And should we be looking at something that is an amount as opposed to a percent? That's right on, Wayne. You made a great point, and I would hope that we add that to our list to talk about, because if there's always this concept that as we drive revenue up, we get more, 14% gives you a bigger absolute number, obviously. Okay, Al, sorry.
All right, to Brenda's point as to the why, when I get to ask that question, I always tell people to keep our city taxes low, because as Jim Berg said, if we lose this gem, this is a huge income generator for the city of San Antonio, and if the city of San Antonio loses it, they're going to have to raise the taxes to make up the loss of that CPS revenue, or they're going to have to sunset some programs, and they're not going to sunset programs. They'd rather raise taxes. To what Wayne was mentioning earlier, I thought about what if CPS could pay the city of San Antonio a 5 or 3 year average as opposed to 14% off the top. 14% of the last 3 year average would be X amount. Then CPS could actually have a hard budget number of what they're going to pay the city next year. And the city could also have a fixed number that they can count on for sure. And the hard part would be transitioning from the fixed number to the 14%. But again, we'll let these guys that are smarter than me figure it out if that's possible. Yes, sir.
Well, that's a very good point. Just following on Wayne's point, there is a whole revenue model. We don't see it. Okay, he goes to Ben Gurzel and his folks. I assume you're still doing that like we did a zillion years ago. So that in that rate model, there's a lot of detail that is not confidential that you might be able to pull out and show us very easily, as opposed to trying to go recreate something. And back to Al's point, is the city from a strategic standpoint, and this has to be set by the board and by the city council or some way, I guess. If we're talking dollars, we're talking dollars. If we're talking percents, we're talking something different. That's your point. How do we get to the right number, Al? And I think it's a good point.
Yes, sir. And,
John, I'm sorry.
And
Al,
and on conservation, Norm, you talked about conservation in water. I think that's more important. Conservation in water is more important because that's the resource we can run out of. As far as electricity, all we do is we can generate all the electricity we want. It'll upset some people how we generate it, but we can generate it. So that's not a limited resource. That's an unlimited resource. And I would vote for nuclear. Now that I threw that out.
Yeah. John Agather's next.
And just one comment as we're passing the mics. So we will bring a series of pro forma sheets with us in 2 weeks, or we'll send them out ahead of time. We're generating those as we're doing our financial analysis. It's got the P&L, it's got the cash flows, it's got cash balances for the accounts, it's got city payment, it's 5 years of history and 5 years of future. So it will meet all of the
Yeah.
financial
That's
requests.
typically what's in the model you give.
That's right.
Ben. Okay. So, and you don't have to do any more work for that. You're working on it anyway. So that'll help this group. Thank you very much. John.
Well, what I'm about to say, I think falls outside of the scope of the RAC, but I'm going to express my personal fears about what's facing us right now. I think that Jim stated it very well. We're all on the same team. I think there's a list of desires of things that we want to accomplish. But at the end of the day, and I think Wayne, you mentioned it, it's that there are financial realities that we have to hit. Or CPS, and this is the doomsday scenario, we lose CPS. And that means that San Antonio loses its economic independence. There is no more discussing green energy. There is no more talking about the 20% of our population that lives at or below the poverty line. That is something that we need to solve if we're going to be an A-level city. We don't get to solve any of that because at the end of the day, it's a market-driven economy, and the citizens of San Antonio are not going to put up with a huge increase simply to satisfy what was a bad financial model. We have to put this company on a solid financial footing. There's some things that happened that were external, but there's some things that have happened that are internal. And we need to take a good hard look at all of that, or we're going to lose the crown jewel of San Antonio. CPSE is the hub of the wheel in San Antonio for economic and civic life.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear when on council, so goes CPS Energy, so goes the city. So it's no problem. Okay, who's next? Femi, please.
I just have a comment, and I guess having asked the questions, the comment is more of what I think I've seen and what I would call, I'll put under the bucket of lessons learned. This is a kind of, to me at least, this is something that would continue long after the RAC has done its work and we continue to live in this city. And the way I posed the question to myself, which was not a question for CPS Energy, was why did the utility not start working on this rate increase earlier? And I know that for many, many sessions and years, perhaps, the discussion has been, well, we've been able to get through this without a rate increase. We've been able to do well without a rate increase. And something that keeps coming back to me is, was it because we had the cover, in quotes, of a healthy wholesale market, which right now is being challenged? So there's pressure on the wholesale market, and therefore we're beginning to unearth and reveal the vulnerabilities that we face. So, you know, it's just a thought, one that I think I'm going to continue mulling over in my mind. Not a question for CPS Energy. It's water under the bridge. It's gone past. But maybe one of the lessons we may learn is we should actually take these things on as and when they come and place it in front of people to make the decision, and not in some way make it look as if, yeah, we can do this without a rate increase. Well, now we've had to do it because something that invariably was making life much more comfortable is no longer assured, i.e. the wholesale market. So it's just a lessons learned type of comment, and obviously I'm happy to talk about this offline in any other forum. Thank you.
I would just say that, Chad, when you bring your pro formas, if you can highlight items that are what I call catch-up, make-up items that we might have delayed and that we're catching up on. And that's what Femi's saying, is that we might have been able to bring a smaller increase earlier if we had taken these into account earlier. And so to me, it's kind of, in the world I spent my life in, what's the deferred maintenance? Okay, what are we making up with capital today or with expenses today that we deferred in the past, and that's contributing to the larger percent of increase than we normally would have seen. If you can identify those either through what's in the capital plan, the cash part of the capital plan, or in the operating, we've already talked about labor, we've talked about We've talked about needing the computer system, some of these other things. So I think what a lot of folks are saying was the philosophy to just, make do, get along, make it work, patch it up. And did that in essence, all of a sudden start catching up with us. We need to understand that. And I think that's Femi's going. Sorry, Dana had.
Is it possible to know who actually makes the decision on what percentage of the revenues of CPS go to the city? Is it CPS? Is it the mayor? Is it the city council? Is it the trustees? Is there an answer that you could give us on that? I have another question too. Well, no, I want an answer that's definitive.
We'll get you one, but I
Okay.
don't have a definitive answer on this.
Hey, Chad.
Yes, ma'am.
It's by ordinance. It's an ordinance that was approved. It's also in our it's in our bond ordinance embedded in the statements that we issue to bondholders. So by council approval, it's a calculation.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, let's see if we have got some other folks that want to try to synthesize some stuff that we might need to talk about in 2 weeks after we've been through the affordability and the energy burden. Yeah, please go ahead.
Although we just received a response to me that was pretty definitive, what is the likelihood that this committee would recommend going to city council to see if they would consider a lesser amount? I mean, is that even something we would think about?
Again, I think you have to look at what this group is. We are 21 individuals and each one of us has a voice. So as individual people, we need to capture that voice. I'm get very concerned about a combined report that loses somebody's voice. So as we get further along in this, and something we'll talk about in 2 weeks, is how do we make sure that everybody's voice is heard and understood by the folks that we're supposed to report to, which in the bylaws is the management and the board of trustees. It actually doesn't say the city council. So, we need to make, boy, now I can see everybody up there. Why didn't we have this before? A miracle. Thank you. We got a better attendance than I thought.
Yes,
That's
sir.
wonderful. Yeah, go
Reed,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to mention, Anita has also been wanting to chime in as well, sir.
Fine. Please do, Anita. I'm sorry I don't see you and I haven't. Okay, go, please. You
Hi,
have to
no,
leave
that's
your
okay,
you have
thank
to
you.
leave your video on and they have to show me everybody. Or you're not there, okay? I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Anita.
very much appreciate all of the conversation right now. I was just gonna, comment and say this goes back to this basic, back to the basics, and that is like, why is there a rate increase being suggested? The bottom line, what is that? Is that people want to know? Is that the unpaid storm debt? Is that the 120 million going to escalate to 138 million of unpaid pandemic, customers? That's one piece. What's the, how much is preparedness? A big question that we keep asking it, what percentage of this whole thing is fixed? What are the fixed costs? And one of the ways I think about it, and Chad, you went through this with us, is like in residential, we look at, okay, well, those fixed costs versus the variable costs, well, that's like 59% fixed and 41% variable, which is high, which is risky, and the biggest cost of that is fuel. That story, I think that the challenge for me is there's a story here that the numbers show, and to understand it and be able to communicate that to the public. At the end of the day, I success for me in this process will be moving forward and giving some type of bottom line findings or recommendations is even, you know, something to talk about, but basic findings and understandings so that we, you know, that this body can be helpful, you know, at the end of this process. And of course, talk about these are the areas that need to have a deeper dive or like be looked into the long-term goal. So, and again, I was going to say, I think a big variable part of our expenses when we start really looking, doing a deep dive on the flow of funds is of our fuel sources. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Okay, well, I guess if you bring us the pro formas, it won't have the fuel cost on it because that's not in the rate increase. But we will need to look at that and understand that, particularly as we look at this. But again,
Well, and this goes back to, you know, understanding where are we going and why, what is the general theory of things, like the operational plan here for the past couple of years. I mean, I think that's an important thing to A, understand, and B, to be able to communicate to the community. And because, you know, that's where programs like, you know, Flexible Path and, you know, others looking at like battery technologies and how that fit, what are those future ideas and costs and how that's going to impact our long-term financial planning, basically, because everything is a game changer right now.
The fact that fuel has been so abnormally low for so many years may have been part of the answer to Femi's, you know, query about why didn't we, you know, feel pressure to raise rates earlier. Extremely low fuel costs for, you know, multiple years, that which has now ended.
well, that's absolutely right. Except, you know, again, we're focused on the rate increase, which does not include an increase in fuel costs, because that 1 cent or whatever is historically, it's back there in 1973 or 4.
Yeah,
And
understood.
so the fuel cost is not going to be, that's not going to be looked at by the council. That the fuel cost, the power purchase agreements, the STEP program, what am I forgetting? There's so many things you've thrown in that. Those will not be looked at in the rate case. And when we look at these pro formas, we will get a handle, and we all need to, it's been clear to me today, we've got to get a handle on what is in the rate case. Okay? Now, we got to understand these fuel things. Kurt's right. Anita's right. We have to, as a group, understand the impact of those, but the rate case will not include the fuel.
Reed,
Yeah,
sir,
Yep.
can you hear me?
we can. You want to turn your picture on? We'd like to see you.
I would love to see you. My camera is not functional right now. I'm having some tech problems.
We are too. We are too. So don't feel bad. Go ahead, Paula.
Just real quick, we will make this clearer, but I just want to make sure that we highlight what we've done here is bill impact. So we'll be bringing you what it looks like in the components. So you will see what the effect is through fuel, and it will have the effect of the additional flex power bundle and the effect of usage. What we're realizing is we did this to really make sure that people knew what their bill was going to be. So just for clarity, you'll see it all. Now, to your point, the council has the automatic ordinance that we use for the fuel factor and how it works. And as Chad says, what happens is they empower the city staff as the regulator to manage that number. So they don't, you're right, they don't look at every single PPA or the components of gas or whatever's in there, but the council empowers the city staff to review it, as Chad explained. So that's how that happens. And STEP is in there too by ordinance. So everything is not approved transactionally, but it is approved all the way through tariff. And the approximate 10% that we're working to bring down is total bill. And we'll show that when we come back.
And that's very important, Paula, because if you're 10 10% is total bill, then the city council needs to understand when they start looking at that rate sheet that we've all seen many times that Chad's talking about, whether it's pipelines or what, when that rate sheet, then what you're saying is that is not going to be 10%.
No, you'll have, matter of fact, you'll see some ebbs and flows all the way through it. So we'll roll you
All right.
through.
Well, we definitely need to understand that. And Dee Dee's next. If you're finished, Paula, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's perfect. I just wanted to be helpful.
All right, thanks. You are. Go ahead, Dee Dee.
Quick question, and listening to Ms. Gold-Williams, she just threw out Flex Power Bundle real quick. I was wondering, if I've asked this a couple of times, that Flex Power Bundle went out a while, that was RFI last year and then an RFP. Will we see the proposals from that? Because I'm wondering, did CPS account for future costs associated with power generation and the proposed increase in energy rates? So I think people in this committee have brought up, transitioning costs of renewables, but we really don't know, until we can see that Flex Power Bundle results or proposals.
I guess the bottom line question that Dee Dee's asking is, when you present those pro formas to us, will there be any impact on the pro formas from the Flex Power Bundle? If that's right. Is that what you're saying, Dee Dee? Okay, thank you. And we've got Norm.
Chad, I didn't want to put you on the spot. Do you happen to know the ratio or percentage of inside city limits versus OCL customers for CPS? I knew that random question like that you wouldn't know. But what I wanted to make sure everyone understands is the incredible benefit the city of San Antonio gets from the hundreds of thousands of OCL customers that aren't paying city tax, but are paying the 14% on their CPS bill. So starting to monkey, if you will, with that component of the revenue requirements is really, I'll say, dangerous, risky, probably would never happen. I can't imagine the city council stepping up and agreeing to reduce the amount of revenue flow that they get from CPS Energy. But please do remember that there's a huge component of that total transfer to the city that comes from people even outside of Bexar County. I mean, CPS extends out into other counties, and those people are paying that 14% on their electric and gas bill that's going to the benefit of the city of San Antonio. So please remember that as we talk about this.
I think it's somewhere between 10 and 20% are outside, but it might be a little bit more, might be up to 30.
Well, let's get a good number on it.
Yeah.
We don't need to guess at it. Go ahead, Peter.
With that being said, I wanted to chime in on the 14%. I think it is a valid request to look at that. I think it's fiscally responsible to consider it, and as a RAC recommendation to have that as part of the discussion, because as we're hearing the dire forecast potentially come in, that's something that has to be on the table to consider the overall well-being of the financial status of CPS.
Can I make a comment about the 14%?
Sure. I'm not sure who's talking, but please do.
Anthony,
Anthony, go. Okay. I get
one
these
of the
voices coming at me.
Okay. The bond indenture is what established, I think, the 14%. And that allowed CPS Energy or San Antonio Public Service, CPS, however you want to call it, gave the company their freedom to operate as a municipality. So I think it's important for us to discern exactly what that legal component is in terms of, I think they called it a bond indenture. I remember years and years ago when CPS would go before the city council, before they get there, they'd always talk in terms of the goose that laid the golden egg. And CPS realized the important attribution of the amount of revenues that would be generated to the city of San Antonio. And so, and also, city of San Antonio saw the same thing in terms of it was an inextricable relationship. The city council benefited from having that resource. But I think it's really important for us to fundamentally know, is that inculcated in structure that cannot be changed because that was essentially CPS's birthright. I might be wrong, and maybe Paula can speak on that issue, but what I understand is that it was part of a bond indenture that essentially was established to give CPS, in exchange for its municipal status, that it would give back 14% of their gross revenues. So I might be wrong about it, but I think that's the way it went.
CPS.
If I could offer a little bit of insight, thanks, Anthony. It was a bond indenture initially, and now it's converted to an ordinance. Basically, it's the overall description and obligation that we utilize to make sure that we meet our obligations actually to bondholders, but it spells out really our creation and the arrangement as Anthony has described. That was the arrangement. We would give them 14%. Just about every municipal entity has some type of what city transfer. We probably have the highest combination of dollar amount and rate. There are some utilities that have higher rates, but they're usually smaller. Some utilities have a rate of like 6%. We are considered we're a premium company in terms of the level of city transfer that we have. And the city uses every single dollar that we send them over. And so I think, of course, a lot of you are appointed by council members, and we could also have Ben come back and be helpful. But Anthony's right. It was kind of the way we were set up. But it is a really high rate. And when you look at the rate of it and the total dollars transferred, and it does drive a lot of value. It does help keep property taxes from going up further.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Anything else? Anyone else? Somebody raise their hand?
Yes, this is Adrian. I believe Michael Kinnick has his
Michael,
hand.
please. You're going to have to get your hand up a little higher.
Okay.
There you go.
This is
I
just
see
a
it
real
now.
quick one. It's not as pertinent as this discussion, but back after our September 9th meeting, I had written a couple of specific questions about the UTC calculations, and I haven't heard back. So perhaps one of our items in 2 weeks would be an answer to those questions I had back in early September. Over.
Michael, it's on the website under our questions. We've put an answer out there. I'll send you a link to it. But we did answer the question. We just posted it out on the website.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Send us all a link to the website on those questions. I need to look at them too. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else? Oh, Eloisa, please.
Hi, yeah, my questions are regarding the questions online. There are questions that have been answered, but there's a lot of questions that have not been answered. And so I would also want to highlight if those are going to have a response, in an upcoming session. Like I noticed the one specifically on utility burden that I asked, I think in the very first or second meeting. It's listed in the questions, but it has not been answered because I'm assuming we're going to cover that next time we meet. But are there also questions that are just not going to be answered? Or, what exactly is I feel like there should still be a response to the question, whether it's upcoming in another session or we don't necessarily have that information, but I feel like there should be a response to each one of the questions. And so the way the questions are listed right now, there are some that you can actually click on and see the response, and CPS staff has thoughtfully provided a response, but there are some that don't have a link. And so what is the status of those, or how do we even know what the status, if they're going to be responded at all?
So Eloisa, it's Ann. We have been working on those for the last week and yes, ma'am, we will continue to work on it. I agree with you. We have not answered the utility burden one because we do plan on doing the 3-hour section next week, but I'll send you a link to show you where we are on all of them. And I think we've made a lot of really good progress over the last week and we will continue to get them all answered for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, sure. You got Chad.
I just wanted to make a comment before we close the meeting because we're getting close to 6 o'clock. I wasn't sure what to expect from a 2-hour session where everybody got the mic for, quite a while. But I've been blown away. You guys are asking excellent questions, and it's because you've been so dedicated in showing up and listening. I mean, the attendance at these things has been phenomenal, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate how dedicated you guys are to learning and listening and asking the right questions. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Chad. One more thing I'd ask people to think about is we're eventually going to have to communicate with the Board of Trustees and the CPS Energy's management. There's a couple of folks that have talked to me, but I'd like to hear more people. I do not see that we've got 21 people that we can jam into a particular statement. I don't think that's particularly helpful. So we need to think about how we get everybody's opinions and voices across in a consistent way that is informative. Okay. We've discussed several approaches. Some have been rejected. My first one was totally rejected. It was that everybody would write their positions down on these things. I can certainly see why that one doesn't work. We've also thought about a series of questions that people answer and then put comments under so that we can aggregate those and see what the feeling of, because we've got to represent the community. Okay. So the community's got to see everybody's voice. And so please think about that. Give me a call if you get any ideas. You all have my cell phone number. Al's got one right now. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Don't put them on the spot. Okay. Well, he's one of the members of the trustees. Sure. I mean, I think we need to, again, I'll leave that up to, well, let's think about it, how we do that, because I don't want the trustees to think that they have to come in and answer before they've heard everything from CPS or from us. So we do have our liaison, and it would certainly be appropriate for Janie to be here if she wants to be, and we need to make sure that she's welcome and can listen to the discussion. I just think sometimes you get folks in that position in here, they feel like they've got to respond, and I don't know that that's necessary, but it's a good point, Al. Just think about how we do this, okay? Because it is all of our obligation to communicate, and I want to make it work for everybody. Anything else before we adjourn? I appreciate everybody's attention. I appreciate the comments. I think we have had a very productive time, and let's have a safe trip home, okay? Thank you.